In this video, we're going to take a look at two commands that apply to entire sections of a Word document. I've got my sample Alice in Wonderland document here, and we are going to apply a couple of formatting commands. First one we're going to apply is page orientation. Page orientation applies to an entire section in a Word document, and that is on the Layout tab. And we're going to change the orientation from Portrait to Landscape. Now, to see what happened, we need to go to our View tab here and tell it that we want to see multiple pages. And then we're going to shrink it down, and let's see what we get there. Okay, so it shrinks it down, and we can see the entire document on the screen. We can't read any of it, but we can see how it's laid out. So every single page in my document now is landscape orientation, whereas a minute ago every single page was portrait orientation. The other command that we're going to look at in this video is columns. So we're going to go to our columns here, and we're just going to set it to 2 columns. And if you look at the entire document now, the entire document, every single page is divided up into 2 columns. So what do you do if you want to have one of these commands apply to just part of your document? Let's say, for example, let's say I've got a place in here where I've got a couple of pages. Let's go back to our normal orientation here. Let's go back to portrait orientation. Okay. And let's say that I've got a couple of pages someplace in the middle of my document here, and these are kind of wide tables. They're pages that would be better viewed if we had them in landscape orientation instead of portrait orientation. Okay. Well, let's first of all, let me click on this, and then let me change my zoom. So I clicked on this page right here, and actually what I think I'll do is I'll click on the beginning of chapter 3 here. So let's say that I want all of chapter 3 to be in landscape orientation and the rest of my document to be in portrait orientation. Then what I need to do is I need to make chapter 3 a separate section. Okay, so I go to the beginning of chapter 3, and I'm going to go to my Layout tab and go to Breaks in the Page Setup group here. So click on Breaks, and we've got 4 kinds of section breaks. We've got Next Page, which will put in a break and then push this down to a new page as if we insert a page break there as well. We've got Continuous, which will insert a section break but just leave this, in column 2 of this page the way it is. And then we got 2 other ones that only make a difference if you want your even pages and odd pages to be different. And that's only something if you're doing front and back printing, for example, if you're doing a book or some kind of a booklet. So the only ones we're really concerned about here are Next Page and Continuous. Now, since this is going to be a command I'm going to apply is going to be for page orientation, you can't have part of a page be portrait and the other part be landscape. So I need to insert, let's go back here. I need to insert a Next Page section break, and that'll push that down to the beginning of a new page. Now I also need to go back, when I get to chapter 4, I need to go back to portrait orientation, so I need that to be a separate section as well from chapter 4 on. So I need to put in another break. That's also going to be a Next Page break. It has to be a Next Page break if you're doing page orientation. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to, and actually let's zoom way out on this, like we did a little bit ago. And let me see. Now I've lost my cursor, but let me zoom in a little bit. So here's my cursor. I'm going to put it up here just to make sure that it is above the section break. So you can see the section breaks if you have your Show Hide button pushed in. So there's a section break, there's a section break, and now I'm going to make sure I'm in chapter 3 someplace. I'm going to zoom out a little bit because it's easier to see if you zoom further out. So remembering that I am in chapter 3 now, let's go to my Layout tab and let's change the orientation to portrait, or I'm sorry, to landscape for chapter 3. And when it redraws, you see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pages right here. This dotted line there, if we zoomed in on it, that would be the section break ending section 1 and beginning section 2. And if we zoomed in on this right there, that would be the section break that ends section 2 and begins section 3. So if you want part of your document to be one orientation and the other part of your document to be a different orientation, you must divide the document up into sections. The other command we're going to look at in here is the columns command. So I'm going to make sure I'm still someplace in chapter 3 here, and all my document is 2 columns so far, but I'm going to change what's in section 2 here, chapter 3, to 3 columns instead. And when it redraws, I've got 3 columns for these 4 pages. Everything else is 2 columns. So if you want to change the number of columns someplace in your document, you have to divide your document up into sections. Now here's something interesting that happens with sections. Let's go to the end of chapter 3 here, and I'm going to zoom in. And it should keep me with the cursor here. So we're in chapter 3 someplace now, and this is where we've got 3 columns. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the end of chapter 3, and I'm going to select or click to the left of the section break, and I'm going to delete it. And what you might expect is that all of the formatting from chapter 3, which is 3 columns, will now carry down to the next section. Now we've got a 2-section document, and the choice here is either the formatting from section 2 gets carried over to section 3, or the formatting from section 3 gets carried up to section 2. And I'm going to delete that, and when I do, you see what happens is the formatting from below gets carried up. And I'm going to do a Control Z here for a second. And the reason I think that works that way is because when you write a paragraph and you hit the Enter key at the end of a paragraph, the formatting information for that paragraph is all stored right there. If I were to delete a paragraph here that had some formatting characteristics, delete a paragraph mark, and it suddenly becomes, these two suddenly become one paragraph, I've deleted the formatting information for this paragraph. The only formatting information that's left is the formatting information for the paragraph below, and therefore that is what will get applied to both of these paragraphs. And I think the same thing is true for sections. If you delete a section break, the information for that section is stored in this character right here, and when you delete it, the only thing left is the formatting for the following section. So if you want to do either a change in page orientation or you want to do a change in the number of columns in your document, this is the way you have to do it. You have to divide your document up into multiple sections.